What do you think it was, though, that made them come through?
I think it was that we had a great story. You know, in the end, we had a great story where it was emotional and it was painful, but it was also triumphant and you know, and possibly inspiring. You know, that you have these people that rose up and, you know, and decided to take ownership of the situation and make something of it. And I think that's kind of inspiring. And I think it speaks to a greater truth of, you know, what's important in the world and, you know, is it family or is it conquest and these different ideas. So I think it does speak to sort of a more universal story. But, that, you know, so we had to re-pitch the film, essentially. And they said, yeah, no, we agree, it's good, let's do it. So they stayed on board, thank God. But, you know, so it was, like I said, I didn't know I had a film. So at the time, you might think I was high-fiving myself, but I wasn't. I was just in a continual state of panic and I barely slept for 2 weeks.
These events happened in 2014.
2014. Almost 2 years ago, yeah.
Has the situation changed, improved for the Sherpas since?
In the immediate aftermath of those protests, it took until about August until the government finally announced that they were agreeing to all of the Sherpa demands. And so apparently they were all met. We haven't really had the opportunity to test whether or not that, you know, that is the case, because the following season, so last year, there was that massive earthquake which triggered another avalanche at base camp, killing this time 20 people, including 10 Sherpas. So the season was cancelled again. So 2 seasons for the Sherpas without any income, and then, you know, to boot, most of their lodges and houses and sustain massive damage, and it's been a terrible couple of years.
Was this film in any way intended to be a portrait of first world affluence and third world economic necessity? Because it's the contrast is sometimes shocking. You've got people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go on these adventures, and the people who are making it happen are, in comparison, dirt poor. This is something that comes through in the film, Jennifer, but was it intended to be a commentary on first world, third world issues?
I think Everest has become, it's symbolic of first world greed in many ways. So yeah, that wasn't an accident. And, you know, I don't think Universal or Screen Australia or anyone would have financed the film if they didn't think there was some inherent conflict and drama there, and I think that was part of it. It wasn't the whole story, but it provides some pretty stark juxtaposition, which is quite powerful.
Now, I'd love you to draw on your experiences with these adventurers, these rich people who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go and seek thrills for bragging rights. I mean, they climb Everest and it's just so they can come back and tell their story, presumably to their friends over dinner parties and so on. What say you to those people? Sorry?
You're right about part of it, but not everyone that goes to climb Everest is like that. And yes, there is a certain proportion of people like that, absolutely. They, you know, there's a saying that I kind of really agree with, that there's 2 kinds of people that climb Everest, egomaniacs and dreamers. And there is a large proportion of not rich people, often people from other poor countries like, you know, Turkey or Greece or Panama or, you know, that you know, or young Australians who have been caught up in the magic of this literature and the romance and the ideas, and it's a personal conquest. It's not about conquering anyone or anything. It's a different attitude. So I think you have to be careful there, because there is both.
In the case of Everest, people throw themselves against this mountain and obviously want to come back so they can tell the story. When things go south, though, what then happens is simply a matter of nature taking its course, taking the course that an adventurer has tried to defy for reasons of ego, adventure, whatever. Do you have any understanding or any sympathy with people who have limited sympathy for people who perish in these circumstances? It's a very harsh question, but the issue does come up in the film that the mountain is just there The mountain's not bothering anybody, and it's people who challenge the mountain. The nature of a challenge is that you accept that you might lose. And if you accept that you might lose, what sympathy can you then expect from people?
Yeah, I take the point, and I guess the answer to the question is, to those people that don't prepare themselves adequately and that go there in an ignorant way without an open mind, and without any training whatsoever, which is often the case. You'd be surprised on Everest. It is unbelievable how some people, I mean, I've seen people being taught how to put their crampons on at base camp, and they go just to climb Everest. They may not have climbed any other mountain in the world, and why anyone's crazy enough to take their money to do that, I don't have any respect for or any sympathy for, mainly because they are endangering Sherpa lives in doing it. You know, if they were just endangering their own life, fine. But the fact that they embroil other people in that pursuit, yeah, that's what I have a problem with. As to why people, do I understand or have any sympathy for adventurers generally, for pitting themselves against,
Your kayaking guy, for instance.
yeah, so he wasn't risking anyone else's life, okay? What I do understand, and I have dug really deep around this because it perplexes me, and I have really, I think in my work I've really tried to explore and understand this, is that it's almost a genetic thing. To people like this, and we now understand, scientists have discovered what they call the thrill seeker gene, where certain people, like anything, it's on a spectrum, and certain people need higher levels of stimulation to feel alive. And so I do feel some sympathy for those people, because in order to be true to themselves, they have this need to test their limits and to understand. I think they're searching for meaning. They're trying to understand themselves, and I have some understanding of that. I have some sympathy for the fact that to ask somebody that is just a spirit like that really needs to feel alive in the world. Others of us get a little bit nervous crossing the road. These people need to really throw themselves out there to feel anything, and that's part of their makeup, and they don't really have a choice in that. Where I draw the line is, and I felt some of that myself. I feel that I've felt that call to adventure because it's a thrilling feeling. But where I draw the line myself is the fact that I now have people that I'm responsible to. I have 2 children, and they didn't choose to be mine. My husband chose to marry me, and my parents, I didn't get any choice in that. But I think once you become a parent, that dynamic needs to shift. Women are certainly judged more harshly in that than men. There's plenty of men that climb Everest and no one judges them. People raise their eyebrows at the idea of a woman being up there. But I take a segue. It's, so yes, I do have some sympathy, and I just think, to really understand why people do that, you need to sort of explore it more thoroughly, and I do think that it is just the nature of some people to do that. Some people are thrill seekers, and there is a psychological or genetic kind of explanation behind it.
Was it an advantage making this film being a woman?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was an advantage because I think, for example, for me, the most important characters in the film are the women. Purbatashi's wife, and I think she knows I'm a parent, and that there's a relationship that you can build. I'm less threatening than lots of people, but I think also right from the outset, I think being a woman informed the fact that I wanted to approach this story in a different way that it had been approached before. I have a different point of view of the world, and I think, there's not many women that have the experience on Everest, and none of the men that had experience on Everest had chosen to explore this particular point of view before. And so, yes, I think there was that. I think the Sherpas, found me to be non-threatening, because they're quite shy people. But I have to say, one of my absolute, secret weapons with this film, which was unexpected, was the American cinematographer Renan Ozturk, who not only is a brilliant climber, amazing cinematographer, he happens to speak fluent Nepali, and the Sherpas adored him, you know, and he's male, you know, and so it was a sort of a combination of a sensibility of a bunch of people, and so, yeah.
Tell me about your personal relationship with Everest.
It's just kind of like what I said at the beginning. I don't have any desire to summit the mountain, but it was more that, you know, I developed a relationship with the Himalayas more generally, because I had these opportunities to work there, and so it was more just that, you know, when you're trying to build a career, you say yes to these things. And I also just loved being there. I mean, you know, for me, I feel alive when I jump out of that plane, I put my backpack on and I start walking, and I feel fantastic. I love being in that part of the world, and, you know, I want to take my family there. My husband's been up there with me, and, you know, but predominantly I'm a city girl, but it kind of renews I feel renewed. I feel like I hit a reset button when I go there, and so Everest in particular, I have no desire to go back to Mount Everest. It's a crazy place.